You do not want to get a surgery unless you do this one thing first. And this is really, really important. There's a lot of risks when you go into a surgery. One is dying. This video is not just for patients, it's for doctors too, so they can look at the research. And this simple thing, which basically costs pennies, can create a massive improvement in your outcomes of the surgery you get. Getting your vitamin D tested and making sure you have sufficient vitamin D before surgery. All surgeries. What is so special about vitamin D in relationship to a surgery? Doing the surgery itself lowers your vitamin D because there's trauma involved. If you're deficient in vitamin D, blood pressure can go up. Vitamin D is one of the best remedies for high blood pressure because vitamin D increases something called nitric oxide, which helps vasodilation of the arteries. Your immune system depends on enough vitamin D to prevent infections like sepsis, inflammation. Vitamin D is really important to reduce cardiovascular complications after surgery. In one study, before the operation, there was an average of 42.7. And take a wild guess what the average vitamin D was after the surgery. 28. In your mind, you might think I might need to take 2,000 IUs. No. People are taking like 100,000 or even 300,000 or more before surgery. Then you also have vitamin D affecting your muscles. If you don't have enough vitamin D to the muscles can become weak and your risk of falling down greatly goes up. If you're elderly, this is a problem because you might end up fracturing yourself. I mean, even if you do a search on Google Scholar, and I found 6 studies involving vitamin D and surgery for osteoporosis, another 10 studies on bone in general and vitamin D in relationship to healing after surgery. If someone has low vitamin D, their post-operative inflammatory indicators actually increase by 200%, and the wound that they just created takes longer to heal. Vitamin D also controls this antimicrobial peptide, which is a compound to help your immune system kill microbes. Vitamin D has the potential to increase those antimicrobial peptides by 4,000%, keeping the complication of an infection way down. Well, surgical complications are cut in half with sufficient vitamin D. In one study, I found as much as half of atrial fibrillation was reduced with enough vitamin D. And that study, it actually blew my mind. They were using 600,000 IUs of vitamin D3. We definitely want to make sure we have enough vitamin D if you're going into an open heart surgery, if you're having your thyroid taken out, surgery to remove cancer. If someone is low in vitamin D, the post-surgical cognitive side effects or dysfunction, 8 times more likely to have cognitive dysfunction after a surgery if you don't have enough vitamin D. Having enough vitamin D can decrease your risk of having some type of rejection when you're doing a organ transplant. In one study I found there was fewer complications, especially in the area of ventilators, when 120,000 IUs of vitamin D was used. When you think about vitamin D, think of fewer days in the hospital after the surgery, faster healing rates. There was a study involving children in intensive care. They loaded up these children 10,000 IUs per kilogram. At first, I thought it was a typo. It should have been 1,000 IUs, but it was actually 10,000 IUs. So some people are going to ask, well, what about the toxic effects? We're only talking about using these high doses, 3 days before surgery. We're not talking about using the high doses long term. You're not getting all that vitamin D to go in there, but you're at least saturating the body with enough to make sure that there's no cells that are insufficient. Now, there's also some interesting data about your adrenal glands, okay? Because going through a surgery puts a lot of stress on your adrenals. This is why they monitor your heart, because sometimes your adrenals might overcompensate with adrenaline and you can end up with high blood pressure. So there's definitely an adrenal stress surgery connection, giving you a risk of adrenal insufficiency. They've even tested cortisol spike after a surgery. It can increase by 4x if you're low in vitamin D, which can worsen your ability to heal, your regulation of inflammation. Your adrenals do not want to go through a surgery with low vitamin D. Vitamin D influences over 2,000 genes, but there's 200 of those genes relate to your adrenals. This video is not just to remind you to get your vitamin D tested before surgery, but to make sure you have sufficient amounts. And I'm not talking about just a little bit. I'm talking about a lot before you go into surgery. You want to take this additional vitamin D 3 days before a surgery so it has time to really penetrate and get into your cells and act as a protective mechanism against the complications of surgery. Thanks for watching. Spread this video to your friends and families so they can have this knowledge of doing something extremely simple and inexpensive to create a lot of good or protect you against a lot of bad things that can happen as you go through a surgery.